Welcome back to the Luxury Rental Doctor Show. I'm Dr. Rachel, your pharmacist turned real estate professional. I am here to help you really escape that burnt out and to create financial freedom through luxury short-term rental investing as well as midterm rentals. Now, today we are diving deep. We're going all the way to the deep end into the details of the data, of the amenities, and of the numbers. And so I have an amazing guest with you to unpack all of this. Joining us today is the brilliant John Bianchi, founder of STR Search. He is our go-to expert inside of our community for all of the data-driven insights. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but Rachel and I are friends now.
Yes.
We've been going back and forth for almost 3 years. I was thinking about that. You actually were one of the first people to really realize what I was doing when no one really kind of knew what I was doing, and you were like, "Oh, that's impressive or that's useful." I remember it very clearly because I'd explained what I had done to a lot of people, and you realized what I was doing, and I think that's because you have that strong data side.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to give you a quick shout out and a thank you right before we get started, before we get into it, just saying like thank you for noticing that because you put me in contact with quite a few people to help build up what I
Oh.
was doing. So in case you didn't know that, I really do appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, John. That means the world to me. And what intrigued me when I ran into you was the data, like you said, the numbers. So anyone, if you want to sweet talk me, just hand me a spreadsheet, okay? I am the data girl. I love me a good spreadsheet because at the end of the day, I posted something on social media, and I'm going a little bit off topic, but I posted on social media the other day, when I was trying to get out of $500,000 in student loan debt. I wasn't looking for passive income. I was looking for aggressive income. And so, John, data is your bread and butter, especially in this short term rental realm. What would you say is one piece of data that investors often underestimate and they're completely overlooking when it comes to analyzing short term rental markets?
Whew, loaded question. Okay, the one thing that everyone's overlooking, it's
Mm,
a bit of a tough question for me to answer, for being very honest, because the reality is that I've been doing it for so long that I'm kind of out of that beginner stage,
yeah.
and I have been out for a while, so I don't know. But if I were to guess, right, if I were to guess based off of the conversations that I've had with people, is that the one major mistake that people are making when it comes to analyzing the data is that they don't study the market, they study a
Mm,
property, right?
yeah.
So, as an example, a lot of people will be deciding that they want to get into the short-term rental game, and then
Yeah.
what they'll do is they'll pick a market that they are familiar with most of the time, and then they will find a home that they know they can afford to purchase, right? And then they'll look at that home, and they'll go, "Will this home be cash flow positive? Like, will this home work as a short-term
Mm,
rental?" Okay,
okay.
rather than simply going, "Okay, I know about this market. I'm intrigued by this market.
Hmm.
Let me study all of the current Airbnbs that exist within this market and
Mm.
try to understand what the revenue drivers are, which homes are doing better than the other ones, right? Like, and why? Why is this home outperforming that home?" And just simply try to understand why that might be happening. Is it the location? Is it the amenities? Is it the colors? Is it the size of the backyard? What is it, right? And then once you've done that, go and take a look at the properties that are for sale. Go look at the ones that are for sale that match up well with the homes that are performing well, and then see if there's cash flow to be made. Does
Mm.
that make sense?
It does. It's almost like a matchmaker, right? So you figured out that essentially a criteria box or buy box essentially, and
Yep.
now you're reverse engineering and looking for properties that are as close to possible what that criteria is in order to see if you can generate that cash flow that those properties are already generating. That information is already out there. Why not use it to our advantage?
Exactly. The alternative way is that you find a home that you can afford,
Hmm.
and then you have to study the data to see if that home's going to work. And then you realize it's not going to work, which is probably going to happen 90% of the time, right?
Right.
Especially if you're just like jumping into a market and randomly grabbing a property.
Hmm.
And so then your next move is to go look at another property that you can afford and do the same thing. And so imagine how many times you have to do that before you realize that there are no homes within that market that will cash flow based off of your budget, right? So it's a significantly faster way to be able to look into a market and know if it's going to cash flow or not without wasting your time going property by property by property, because you'll get burnt out going that way and run out of time.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And one thing that I love is using tools that provide us the track record of a set of properties. So, for example, if I'm going into a market with the lofty goals and dreams that I'm going to generate $100,000, that's my go-to number. Like, if it's not doing $100,000 gross, I feel like, okay, what are we doing here? So, I love using tools that provide us that track record, that provide us the data that we have the ability to look in the past as well as look at the future to see what the future pacing is looking like. So one of the tools that I like to use is called AirDNA, and you and I, whenever there's a new kid on the block, I'll text John is my guys. When John says we're friends, okay? He's my go-to. He's my data ride or die because I'll text him. I say, hey, there's this new kid on the block who has this data platform. What do you think? And John already knows who they are, of course. And he has some insight as to whether or not it's going to be the best use of my time because as a busy medical professional, I can't go down rabbit holes. I need to stick with what works. So, John, I know you and I, we both use AirDNA quite a bit. How can tools like AirDNA or similar platforms help our listeners, take their STR goals of investing to the next level? Are there any common mistakes that you see people experience when they're using data tools?
Yeah. So AirDNA is the tool
Mhm.
that we're referring to, right?
Yeah,
I have looked into pretty well every other tool that exists, and AirDNA is always the most practical one to use. It's
yeah.
also the one that I know the best. And I've learned how to understand what data on that platform I should be reviewing and which data I should be ignoring. And
Mm,
so, every single one of these tools is gonna come with its own issues. I
yeah.
just think that AirDNA has the least amount of issues. It
Mhm.
also has the largest tech team. It has the most amount of resources, has the most amount of money to ensure that what they're doing is the best of the best, right? So, I strongly recommend AirDNA to everybody. And the reality though, okay, so now that you've decided, "Oh, I'm gonna use AirDNA," the reality is that most of the information on there is not useful. And the reason being is because there's a lot of errors that do happen with their algorithm because they're the way that it works, right? So for anyone who doesn't know, AirDNA is an absolute blessing to the entire short-term rental industry because we can see exactly how much every single Airbnb is making across the entire world for like $300 a year.
Yeah.
It's insane, right? There's very few industries where you have that much access to information, and as long as you know what you're looking at and avoiding, you can get to the answers that you're going for, right? And the reality is that these algorithms that AirDNA has built out records the calendar of every single Airbnb every single day, and that means it's tracking the it's tracking like billions of pieces of data over a very short period of time, then trying to make sense of all of it. And one of the major issues is that you have part-time hosts, right? So you have a part-time host who is only managing their home for, the summer. They only put up for the summer,
Yeah.
or it's their vacation home that they kind of use whenever they want. And there's a ton of those homes that the AirDNA algorithm just kind of screws up when it's reviewing and analyzing. Like the algorithm isn't built to understand those differences compared to a booked and a blocked stay. And they tried their best, but I still find a ridiculous amount of issues with it. And so the reality, and then also, some listings have only been around for 30 days, right? And they're trying to project what it's going to do over the full year, almost always inaccurate. So then, therefore, um, what you want to do is when you're going into this platform, AirDNA, you want to look for a full time host who has been around for almost an entire year. And
Mhm.
if you can find that combination of those two, you have what I refer to as the most real and accurate data. And when you have that information, you then can make actual decisions and investments based off of that information, right? So, AirDNA is the best as long as you know what you're looking for, right? So, what you want to look for, there's one thing called days available. And anyone who, we're doing a quick podcast here. So, like anyone who wants to really dive deep into this stuff, look me up on YouTube, look up the difference between Airbnb good data versus bad data on YouTube. You're going to find a ridiculous amount of content around it, but I'll try and explain it quickly, right? You want it to be available for over 250 days. You want there to be at least 20 reviews, and you want there to be a review every single month for the past 12 months. And if you can find a listing that meets all those requirements, it's almost always going to be good data. No, almost always. Majority of the time is always going to be good data. There's still some issues there, but majority of the time. And so if you just use that information, you can make good investment decisions. If you use the other information, there's a likelihood that you'll make a mistake. So AirDNA is the gold standard in my opinion, but you have to know what you're doing on there.
Okay, I love that. And one thing that I noticed over the last few years, John, is since Airbnb has quite a bit of market share, there are a lot of tech tools that are coming out of the woodwork. And so I would say just being mindful of your tech stack, whether you're starting out or you've launched a property and you're looking to optimize, is really important. And one of the main criteria for me when I'm looking at technology is how accurate is that data, or how I can find the accuracy within that platform, and the ease of use, right? And so if
Mm,
every time I log into a platform, it's like, oh my gosh, how do I do this again? Like I have no idea because things continue to change. But to be honest, that was my struggle with another competitor.
right.
And so when people ask me about that competitor, I was like, it might be good, but every time I log in, it's like, okay, I need to reorient myself. Ease of
Mm,
use is very important for my community. And so be mindful of that. So and the easier the tool is for you to use, especially if you have a framework like John just asked, I say filters are your friends. You filter it down to, your year-round host. You filter it down to um a bedroom size, or you can then go in and find the actual links to look to check on the reviews, like John says, to make sure there's that consistency with the number of reviews. And then AirDNA, if you have the enterprise level, you can actually spreadsheet it out, which is always a vibe for me. But it's the ease of use. If there's friction, if there's a barrier, I'm not going to log back in. I'm just not, and it's
yep.
right? Subconsciously, it's like I'm dismissing entire platforms because it's just not very easy to use. So keep that in mind as, I get a lot of data companies that do reach out to me and say, use mine, use mine, use mine. But if it's not easy to use and the information I don't understand, it's not very helpful, then I'm not going to use it long term because I got to be quick with my decision making.
Y Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. That's why I
Mhm.
always say, like, I know AirDNA the best. I've been using it for, like, almost 7 years now, something
Yeah.
like that.
Hmm.
Um, and anyone who's maybe questioning, like, "Oh, I've heard that this one's better, this one's better,
Yeah.
this one's better." There's, or actually a better thing that I wanna say here. Some people will say, "I have heard AirDNA is inaccurate and their data's not good and it's crap and it's blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah," right? I hear
Yeah.
this all the time, and the reason you probably hear that more than anything else is because AirDNA has the largest market share, right? So the majority of people are using AirDNA, so they get the majority of the complaints. They're the winners right now, right? With that being said, I want people to realize that I have helped identify we're close to 200 properties. We're like 198 right now. I can't wait to say 200 in the last 2.5 years. And every single last one of those properties is cash flow positive. And I have been accurate with my forecasting of what the revenue was going to be by somewhere between 25% to 50%, meaning that I was conservative by that amount. So if I said it was going to make 100,000, it actually did like 125 or 150. And that's just because I'm always looking at the low end and projecting for the and hoping to get the high end, right?
Yeah.
Um, with all that being said, I am living proof that AirDNA data does work if you know how to use it. So anybody out there who goes, "Oh, no, AirDNA is useless, it's crap, there's whatever it may be," they just don't know how to use it
Yeah.
properly,
Yeah.
right? It's
Meaning, don't
undeniable.
use the rentalizer, y'all. Let's just
Yeah, that
talk
they're
about
still
that for
working
a
on that
second.
one. They're still working on that one.
Yeah,
I have I have faith that they'll eventually be able to figure it
right.
out, but at this moment,
It's
please don't
not
use the
there
Rentalizer.
yet. Yeah.
Use the other stuff. Yeah, they barely even really promote it anymore.
Yeah.
Um, anyways, I don't have an affiliation with AirDNA. I just want people to make good decisions
Yeah.
with their investment because AirDNA, like short-term rentals, are not like long-term rentals. They're a lot easier to screw up, right? We have
100%.
one home that's making $100,000 more than another home, and they're both down the street from each other, and they're almost identical homes, right? There's just a huge difference in how much money you can make from a home on it as an Airbnb if you know what you're doing, if you don't know what you're doing. And
Mm,
so it's easy to screw up, but the data is there to tell us what to do. And you just have to spend some time understanding it specifically for your market
yeah.
so you can avoid those pitfalls.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of times we over fantasize about the acquisition phase of it, but at the end of the day, we gotta buy it right, we've gotta finance it right, and we have to manage it right, right? Because
Yep.
that's the money is made on all of those levels, so
Yes.
we
Yeah.
gotta be mindful of those steps to making sure that, we're profitable at the end of the day.
Yep.
Now
And
go ahead.
one thing just I want to add on to that real
Mhm.
quick, because you said the acquisition stage and the management stage. The management side of things, you can correct. Right? If you screw up a
Mhm.
cleaning, if you have do a terrible job hosting a guest, you can fix those things fairly easily and get things back on track.
Yeah.
Buying the right property, that's a hard one to fix. Now, 1031
Mm,
exchange does exist and you can swap into a new property, right? But it's
yeah.
a difficult thing to do. It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of money that goes into it, and furniture depreciates faster than probably anything else. So,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
just keep those things in mind and do everything you can to get that acquisition right. Not trying to scare anybody, but like that is the part you don't want to f up.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and thanks for saying that. My next, episode, in about an hour or so is with David Foster, our 1031 exchange guy, so
There you go. Nice.
perfect
Nice.
timing, perfect timing.
Yeah,
Now,
we
John, you're a big proponent for buying homes with a low basis. So for listeners who might not be familiar, could you explain what that means and why is that such a game changer?
so low basis just means the cheaper home, right? That's also relative, right? A cheap home to one person is very different from a cheap home to another person because we all see a dollar differently. So for some people that could be $1 million home, for other people that's a $200,000 home. That's considered a low basis, right?
Yeah.
But we try our best to find the homes that have a lower basis. We tend to be within the 300 to $1 million range. I hate going over a million. I hate it. I really do because Airbnbs are not like something that you can sell an unlimited amount of, right? So,
Okay, can you unpack that for me for a moment? What do you
yeah.
mean by that?
So, let's say that I was a CPA, okay?
Mhm.
I could take on as many clients as I could hire CPAs for, and I
Okay.
could just continue that forever, right? You really could. And so it has this ability as a business, if we think about it as a business, has the ability to almost infinitely scale.
Yeah.
And so the amount of money that a CPA firm can make could be billions, right?
Mhm.
Um, Whereas an Airbnb has 365 days that they can sell every single year, and that's it. They
Yeah.
can't sell more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the reality is that each night goes for a certain dollar amount. And so it's extraordinarily difficult for one Airbnb to make $1 million in 1 year, right? It's next to impossible. Some have done it, but it's next to impossible.
Yeah.
So then therefore, and then the reality is that the majority of them are going to fall anywhere from like 50,000 to $200,000 a year. And that's it. Okay. And so then therefore, once you if you buy a home that's 2 million,
Mhm.
3 million, right?
Yeah.
The amount of money that you have to make in a year from those 365 days just keeps getting higher and higher the more that the more expensive of a home that you purchase.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking for good cash flow, the cheaper the home, the exact opposite of that would be the smartest thing to do because then you can uh you still have the same amount of days to sell as that more expensive home, but if you can figure out a way to optimize the listing in the best possible way, then you have the lower expenses on the mortgage, on the interest, whatever it may be, in comparison to the $2 million home, and it makes it a lot easier to actually find a home that cash flows, right? So I know that may be stupid simple for what I just explained, and maybe some people are listening to this being like, "Well, duh," right? But the reality is that a lot of people will go like, "Well, look at this $1.5 million home." It's like, great. Now you have to make over $200,000 a year every single year from that home to cash flow,
Yeah.
right? And you got to make sure you can keep doing that year for year. You got to make sure the market can support it. You got to make sure in a downturn you can support that. You got to make sure all these things over and over and over again. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible by any means, right? There are definitely homes where that works. There's definitely markets where that works. But I do this at scale, right? So I'm trying to help a lot of people acquire homes across a lot of different areas. And so I try my best to find markets and areas where it's a low price basis, so a lower purchase price, and there's still a good amount of revenue being generated, a good amount of travel demand, and people willing to pay a good amount of money to stay at those Airbnbs in those markets. And the more that I can find that interact, I don't know what to call that, where it's lower prices and higher revenue, the more you can find that, the likelier it is that the home's going to cash flow. And if the home cash flows, then you're not going to have to sell it, and then you can hold on to the property for as long as you want. And that's really where I consider it to be a good long-term investment, right? So that makes sense.
It does, it does. So when it comes to the optimization side of things, amenities are often the key to a property standing out, one that's winning versus one that may be struggling in a market. What would
Yep.
you say are the most overlooked amenities that are really driving bookings?
Pool heater, I would say, is probably the most overlooked. Meaning, okay, so a better way to explain it are amenities that increase your shoulder seasons, right? So, uh, if summer is your peak season, it's easy to get bookings during that time period. If then you go into the fall or the spring, and that's kind of like it's slowing down a little bit. What could you add to your listing that would get people to book your home in those during those times over the other people? Because now competition's getting a little bit harder, right?
Right.
I love, like, if you're asking like generally, right? Because every single market's different across the board. But logically, if I have a pool heater and another place does not have a pool heater, my pool can stay a little bit warmer when it gets, I'm not talking like cold, I'm saying like warm outside, where maybe you don't want to go into the pool, right? Because the pool's kind of cooled down a little bit. It's still warm outside, but it's not like blistering hot where I need to be in water. But if I had a pool heater, then the pool becomes like nice and warm, and now people can go into the pool and they can actually use the amenity. Whereas if you have a pool without the pool heater, you can't use the amenity, right? So what I'm trying to explain here is that general logic. And so then the next part is, well, what about a hot tub? Would a hot tub allow for me to be able to do that within my market? Could it give somebody something that they could use during the shoulder season? A sauna, right? Would that create something where people could use? And then you kind of, if you think about it in that way, those are my favorite, generically speaking, amenities across the entire United States. But every single market is specific to what works and what doesn't.
So how do you help figure out which amenities are worth the investment based on the data, John?
So you actually showed this, you proved this to me because you have more of a formal data background than I do. And so you there were people coming out back in the day saying like, "Oh, look at, you can use the data to figure out which amenities are going to drive more revenue." And you literally text me and you're like, "This is bullshit. This doesn't make any sense." You're like, "This is completely inaccurate." Like you literally, and I still talk about this to this day, but you proved it, and I was like, "Oh." I was like, "Yeah, you're actually 100% right. That does make sense." You can't really figure out which amenity is going to, or sorry, you can't figure out how much money an amenity is going to drive. You can't say if I buy a hot tub, it's going to make $10,000 more for my Airbnb. You can't really put those two together because of the amount of variables that come into an Airbnb, right? Two homes could be identical, but one person maybe doesn't know how to price their home in the most accurate way for the best lead time to get the most accurate bookings. And so then therefore they both make a different amount of money. And so then therefore, even though they're identical, they don't drive in the same amount of revenue. And now all of a sudden everything's different, right? So with that being said, I have to explain that logic first because most people are like, well, how much do I make if I put in a hot tub? It's impossible to know. Okay. So, so the best way that we have figured out how to do this is match the competition that you're going up against.
Mm,
Okay. So in other words, if you say you need to make $100,000 and you look at all the other homes that are a similar size to yours, right? It's got similar bones of a home, same size backyard, same size interior, and they're making $100,000. You got to look at them and say, what amenities do they have? And that's what I refer to as my must have amenities. You got to have those ones. Step one, get those. You know why? Because if you don't have those, they're going to do better than you. They're going to get booked out more than you. They are providing more value than you. People are going to choose their home over yours because they offer more, right? They're not just you everyone's selling bedrooms, bathrooms, living rooms, dining rooms, but if your competition is also selling a pickleball court, a pool heater, and a hot tub, and you try to go up against them with the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms in the same area, you're going to lose because of all those additional things that they're selling, right? So then therefore, figure out what they have, match what they have. Start there always. Now you've matched your competition. Now you're making the guest when they're reviewing an Airbnb having to see two identical listings and go, "Ooh, which one should I get?" Right? Now they're trying to decide between two that are almost identical. And that's where I always begin. Now, after that, if you want to beat your competition, that's where you start to go, what else could I add to this to drive more revenue? And this is where you get into the unknown world, right? Where
Mm.
the question then becomes, which demographic am I focusing on? So, am I focusing on families, bachelorette groups, bachelor groups? Who am I trying to target here? And then once I understand that, we go, well, what amenities would create a better experience for them while they are there? What could I provide them that would make them want to choose mine over this other listing that has all the other things? And then you just try to figure out what those amenities are. Now, there's no way of knowing from my experience. If I'm wrong, please reach out to me and prove this to me. But from my experience, there's no way of knowing exactly how much additional revenue you're going to make from those amenities that you add in that go above and beyond. We have some homes where we have made like $5,000 to $10,000 more, where we thought we would make like $30,000 more, and we
Mm.
have other places where we've made like $100,000 more, and we are just blown away by the difference. And it kind of gives us validation like, okay, that's the new standard. And then in the markets where it didn't drive revenue, we go, oh, okay, this market has a price anchor where people are
Mm.
just not willing to pay more are not willing to pay an arm and a leg to stay in this market, right? For whatever reason.
Mm.
And so then therefore we go, okay, well, there's a limit here. There is a limit over on the other market as well, but it's much higher than what we expect it to be. So now that's our new standard when we go for our next home too. That doesn't help a lot of people on the call because they're usually only going to buy one or maybe two in the market. But for reference, that's how we've gone about it.
Okay, so this is really interesting because I was just on a call with Avery Carl. She's another short-term rental expert in the community, and she mentioned that about the Tennessee market, right? So the Tennessee mountain market was traditionally a blue collar market, and then you have these investors that are coming in with these Mac Daddy properties that want to put in all the bells and whistles and charge these numbers, per night. Well, that market may not bear the ability to fulfill at that pricing because the market can only tolerate a certain amount of pricing. Of course, there's someone who's able and willing to purchase at the highest price point, but that really reinforces what she was saying. Like, no, traditionally, it was a blue collar market. These are drive to markets where families were, that had a little bit of a tighter budget. They're looking for a quick place to stay over the weekend, and it's an hour drive from wherever they're coming from. So that really reinforces that.
That must be such a. I mean, if anyone's been paying attention to the Smoky Mountains for the
Yeah,
past 10 years, let's say, that must have been like, especially if you lived there.
yeah,
I couldn't imagine what that would feel like to be there because it just boomed so quickly.
yeah.
And I wasn't there. I wasn't studying it 10 years ago. But if Avery's saying it was blue collar before, that logically makes sense to me. But now there are these luxury places,
Yeah,
right? So I'm assuming now there's like it's transformed from that, and the pricing
yeah.
has likely pushed out the blue collar. I
Mhm.
would assume. I mean, anyone go look at the pricing of those homes and go look at the amount that typical blue collar would make. Most likely pushed out of that area.
Yeah.
I wonder where they are now.
Mm.
That's where my thought goes. Where are they traveling now
Yeah.
if they're not traveling there? And is that an area that you could create a better experience for them and kind of, find some good value properties? Hmm.
Mm. That's
Hmm.
a good point. Good thinking. I see the wheels turning for you, sir.
Yeah. You got me thinking.
I love it. I love it. Now, something we've talked about before, John, is I just wanted to hone in on one more thing with amenities before we head over to the next segment. But you mentioned something to me a while ago where, say, we are in a market that's a little bit mad, that's a little bit more traditional, and we could bring in the joy of like some type of theme or something, a little bit of an extra something that would draw in the eyes, that would stop the scroll. Can you talk to our people a little bit more about that? Because there is opportunity out there. However, I'm always a little bit hesitant to be the first. I don't care what business model you're using. I like to be the second. I don't like to be the first. But can you talk us through what it is that I'm talking about and what that would look like?
Yep, for sure. So Kissimmee is a good market to explain this. It used to work. I think
Oh
it
my
used to work
gosh,
way
Kissimmee is
better.
insane. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not recommending to go to Kissimmee, just so everyone knows, but
Okay.
I'm using
Full
this as an
disclaimer. Full
example.
disclaimer. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I do make that sure. So, back in the day, what
Mhm.
well, the people still do it, but, it really worked well, like, 4 years ago, where people would go in and they would add these extreme themes, and so, obviously, people going to Kissimmee are going to, Disney World.
Disney. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
See
so
the
what people
mouse.
exactly, and so what people did was they would bring the themes of anything Disney into their home to create, this experience for the kids, right? And it's like, you gotta really, really think about it as an experience rather than a place to sleep,
Mm.
right? Because that's the logic that you need to think about when you're thinking about the difference between these 2. And so one is an experience, one is not. And, that's what they did. There people were spending like $10,000 on these rooms just to create um, I'm trying
Princess something
yes, I was trying to
or
think
a
of like
superhero, right?
yeah, anyways, so they would create all these and it was immersive, right? You, like,
Yeah,
walk in and, the bunk beds were all made in, and there's slides, and, like, there's cubby holes in the wall, and it's through the whole
yeah.
house, and the game room's extreme, and it's all this stuff where you as soon as you walk in, it felt like you were walking into somewhere in Disney, which is what I always how I always explained it to people. Disney does extraordinarily well because they create immersive experiences. You walk around Disney anywhere, Harry Potter World, it feels like you're in Harry Potter World.
Yeah.
That's what they have done, and then people took that same logic and applied it to the properties, and it performed extremely well. Now, there's a lot of other issues with Disney, so let's think about a different market, right? Another area you could go to is in downtown Scottsdale. People
Okay.
did extreme bachelorette themes where they made the entire home pink, inside, outside, everything, pink related, which means that when a bachelorette group would go and book out that home, they would have a completely different experience at that Airbnb in comparison to the other one that made them feel like they're constantly on this bachelorette experience, whether they're, in the restaurants or they're in the Airbnb. It was just this nonstop feeling of the experience that they're going for. And this is what I refer to as the experience premium, right? So people
Mm.
pay more for their Airbnb to have an experience rather than just a place to sleep. And the way that you build these out is that you have to understand what is the most ideal demographic to build this out for, right? My, a bachelorette one is super easy. You're building it for the bachelorette, right? Group. The opposite is a bachelor group, right? So you create a space where you've got like a poker room and a speakeasy, and it's a lot of dark tones throughout the entire home, and all those things, and mini putt, like golf putting back there because majority of guys like to play golf, and like all those things create an experience for a bachelor party. So that's the idea. It's called an experience premium, and you can create it for your market if you believe that it will differentiate you enough from your competition to get outsized returns.
Mm.
Now, I can't remember exactly how you worded the question because I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent, but I just want to finish it off with one little piece here. And if I missed the direct question, just ask it again. Um, the if you're going to do this, you want to make sure that the market doesn't have a price anchor, right? Meaning that people are
Mm.
not willing to pay an arm and a leg to stay there. The way that I look to figure this out is I say, does this market have luxury properties that are getting outsized nightly rates, right?
Mm.
So you go and look at the Scottsdale market.
Oh,
People are
yeah.
throwing crazy money to go stay there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Why? Because it has luxury amenities, it has luxury restaurants, it has luxury golf courses. It has a
Mhm.
lot of luxury things where people with money like to go to,
Yeah.
right? And so then the Airbnbs make more than others. Now, what I have found is that if there are markets that have that luxury, you can create an Airbnb that creates an experience, and people that would have stayed at the luxury will choose the experience place instead because
Mm.
it's creating a better time for them, right? So rather than having a luxury kitchen, they have an entire experience during the entire time that they are there. And people
Mm.
are willing to not stay at the luxury place and stay at your place for, I mean, not saying the exact same nightly rate, but it would be a higher nightly rate than if it were to be the regular old, I'm selling you a bed to sleep in type place, right? And when the market doesn't have the luxury, you're taking the risk that people would be willing to stay in a you're taking the risk that people are willing to pay the experience premium to stay at your listing over another one, and it doesn't always work out. So luxury is the one thing that I've found that makes most sense or works within that a market if you're going to do the experience premium type of Airbnb.
Love
That
that.
help?
Yeah, big time, big time. Love that.
Okay.
And I jotted down the experience premium, which I think is absolutely amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing that.
Before we move on, I actually just want to ask you a question on this because Um, we talk about this experience premium, and it's actually making me nervous to just like say, "Hey, this is what we've seen," because we've also seen people do that in Disney. And at one point, they were making like 400,000 from these homes, and now they're making like half that, right? And then you have downtown Scottsdale that I was referring to, when the first handful of these like extreme pink homes showed up, they were crushing it, making like 200,000. And then a whackload of additional ones showed up, and now they're all making like 100 to 120, and they're kind of
Mm,
like falling in line with all these other people.
yeah.
Um, have you noticed that on your end? Have you noticed a drop in over designed homes that are creating an experience? Have you noticed a trend in any way, positive or negative, from your own experience?
So far, I have noticed that the experience premium is still there. Like guests are
Okay.
still willing to pay for it. However, I think there's a copycat effect out there right now where a lot of hosts are recognizing that I can just copy and paste what this
Mm,
previous host is doing,
yep.
and it's causing a bit of a, I wouldn't say a friction, but the need to stay on top of your game, the need to level up in other ways. And some of those
Right.
ways do not have to be overly expensive. It's always going to be that hospitality side of things, the bedside manner side of things, the guest communication, the ability to make sure that the place is squeaky clean. We can't forego some of those baseline basics for the experience. So for us, it's staying on top of the communication, staying on top of the nightly revenue, managing our revenue, and adjusting as needed to make sure that we're capturing as much of the market as possible. So I'll keep an eye out
Okay.
because I haven't seen it go down outside of just the competition, recognizing that okay, if I need to spend an extra 50,000 or 100,000, let me go ahead and do that to make it happen.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Keep an eye on it because I am
I
noticing
will.
some stuff, and obviously I'm inside this stuff all day, every day. It's what I do for a
Yeah.
living, so I should be seeing it more often than anyone. But
Yeah, I
it's
will keep an eye. Thank you for the heads up, though.
my theory on it is that it's an oversaturation of a smaller target demographic. So in other words,
Mm.
there's just in downtown Scottsdale, there's 5,000 listings,
Yeah.
almost 6,000 at this point. In all of like the Phoenix, Scottsdale, there's 35,000. However, there's probably only like 30 or 20 or 30 bachelorette extreme themes in the
Mhm.
downtown core of Scottsdale, and it's that is seeing a dip, right? So that
Mhm.
means that they're hyper focused on this specific demographic, but maybe there's just not enough people who one are going for a bachelorette trip and are willing to pay that amount, right? So there's it's a twofold. It's not just a bachelorette trip, but willing and able to pay that amount. So
Yeah, that's good.
yeah,
That's
keep
good
that in
to
mind if
know.
you're going for like a something hyper specific because it's a smaller demographic you're now going after.
Yeah, yeah. What's the market share like? Yeah, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
they are researching that. That's good. That's good information. Okay, so we're about to land this plane. John, I did wanna ask you if you could spill the tea a little bit. What are some underrated markets right now for short-term rentals?
I can't share that.
You can't spill the tea.
Unfortunately, that's the
You
only
can't
one I
give us
cannot.
any of it.
No, so okay, so think about it this way because I get this question asked all the time, and like this is the reality, right?
Give us the
My
reality.
business is to help individuals who you have sent us over, right, to
Oh, yeah.
identify properties in specific markets that would be strong cash flowing Airbnbs. And I do not tell anybody ever
Mhm.
publicly announce any of those markets because if I did, I strongly believe that a lot of people would start to invest in those markets. And then I'm increasing the competition for my past clients. And then it's going to be a lot harder for them to be able to hit the cash flow projections that we are estimating because we've flooded the market with other people. Right. And
Exactly.
so I
Yeah.
always keep them close to my chest so that I don't screw over my past clients, if that makes sense.
I love that. So, John, you have been an absolute joy to have on the podcast today. I would love for you to share with the listeners how to follow up with you, how to connect with you so that you can spill the tea to them in secret as your
Yeah.
clients, as the Airbnb data guy. How do people connect with you so that they can get some of those insights and, work with you to help them to secure a property before the end of the year so that they're not scrambling like crazy?
Yes. The best thing to do is to go to strsearch.com and schedule a call with anyone on my team. We'll walk you through exactly what that looks like. You'll get more information, and then you can directly work with me and my team. Additionally, if you want more information, if you want to learn yourself, if you want to go through any of those things, go to my YouTube channel. I have put out everything. I always say that I give away the entire process. I just don't give away the secrets. But if you follow the process, you get to the secrets, and that's all on YouTube for free. I've put out a ridiculous amount of content.
Yeah.
And so, John Bianchi or at the Airbnb Data Guy, either of those, or just look up Airbnb Data, and I guarantee my videos will pop up on YouTube. And that's the place where I'd say get to know me a little bit, get to trust me a little bit. I've tried to provide as much proof of how to do this on YouTube, and yeah, start there and head over to strsearch.com if you want to talk with us. But Rachel, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I always looking so forward to this when we scheduled it because I feel like I'm just talking to a friend when I do this. So thank you again.
And that's the truth. And that's the truth, my friend. So, guys, if you're ready to take control of your time, you're ready to take control of your finances and future through real estate, connect with John. We're going to add all of his information in the show notes and stick to this channel. Until next time, remember freedom is just one real estate investment away. Catch you next time. Bye bye for now.